Hello friends, welcome back to our YouTube channel Doctorscorner. In this today's lecture we are going to discuss about functions of hypothalamus. Okay, it is very important topic in this subject, physiology of first year MBBS. So many a times it can be a 10 marks long question, describe the functions of the hypothalamus. Okay, so already we have discussed the anatomy of the hypothalamus in our previous lecture. Those who have not seen that lecture, I request them please go back to the playlist in our channel and check for the anatomy, okay, where we have already discussed the location, structure and connections of the hypothalamus. So in this particular diagram what you are seeing, this bright green structure is the hypothalamus. Okay, so it is lying just above the midbrain here below the thalamus. Okay, and here also there is one more diagram showing the relations or the boundaries of the hypothalamus. So I am highlighting the hypothalamus with the red color right now. So this is the hypothalamus. You can see the third ventricle, which will be the which is present here on the middle side, and above there is a thalamus, and of course there is midbrain, pons and medulla, it is the brain stem here. So it is a diencephalic structure. So diencephalic structures are present at the base of the brain and the starting of the brain stem. We have discussed all the details. Okay, so I won't repeat once again all the details about the anatomy, and also we have discussed the various nuclei of the hypothalamus. However, the nuclei of the hypothalamus are very important to understand the functions of the hypothalamus. So before going in detail about the functions of the hypothalamus, I would like to revise the nucleus or the nuclei of the hypothalamus. Okay, so consider this red color mass is an hypothalamus, one side, right or left side. So it is basically divided into two parts. One is this lateral part, which is I am highlighting with the blue color, lateral part or the lateral zone, and one more is the medial zone, which I am highlighting now with the green color. Okay, so now this is the medial zone. So this right and the left part, okay, right and the left part, it is divided by one structure known as fornix. Okay, we have already discussed about this fornix, bundle of the nerve fibers which divide this hypothalamus into lateral and medial zone. So in this lateral zone there is one very important nuclei present, that the name of the nuclei is hunger center or feeding center. So basically only one main nuclei which is present on the lateral zone or the lateral part of the hypothalamus is the feeding center or hunger zone, and beside that there is a thirst center. Okay, this we need to remember while we discuss the functions of the hypothalamus, so that the concept will be clear. Along with that, there is one nucleus, that is the preoptic nucleus. Preoptic nucleus. Okay, preoptic nucleus, which is present on the anterior side of both lateral and medial zone of the hypothalamus. Okay, now let us see the nucleus of the medial zone. Okay, now I'll just draw an enlarged structure of the medial zone. So there are many nuclei present here. So from anterior to posterior, I'm drawing from right side to left side, because it is worth to know the nucleus before going in detail about the functions of the hypothalamus. So let me take some time to at least pen down the nucleuses of medial zone of the hypothalamus. Okay, so basically this medial zone is divided into four regions from anterior to posterior. The four regions are preoptic region, then we have supraoptic region, and also we have tuberal region, and finally we have the mammillary region. Okay, these are the four regions which are present in this medial. Remember, we are discussing now about the medial part of this hypothalamus, this one medial zone. Okay, so now in this it is divided into four regions. Okay, so why it is called preoptic or supraoptic is, you can see there is a structure known as optic chiasma which is present here in the anteriorly. Optic chiasma on the anterior aspect. Okay, what is optic chiasma? Where the two optic nerves will unite. That structure it is known as optic chiasma. Okay, from the right eye and the left eye posteriorly, this optic nerves will be going back posteriorly, and where they unite, that structure is known as optic chiasma. I am just drawing a very rough diagram to just make the point more clear. Okay, optic chiasma. This is the optic chiasma, this is the red color thing what I am highlighting. Okay, now similarly on the inferior aspect, that there is a swelling, okay, that swelling it is called as the tuber cinereum. Inferior aspect, there is one swelling, okay, one median swelling which I am highlighting with the blue color. So now that swelling, it is called as tuber cinereum. We have discussed in detail in the anatomy section. Still we have to describe this. It is worth to know all these details. And from this tuber cinereum, there is an infundibulum where from which the pituitary will be suspended like this. Okay, so this is the pituitary gland. Okay, pituitary gland. So I am just drawing a very rough diagram. Okay, now again on the posterior aspect, there is a swelling here which I am highlighting with the green color. That swelling, it is called as mammillary bodies. This mammillary bodies, tuber cinereum, are parts of the hypothalamus itself. Okay, mammillary body. Now in this preoptic region, we have so many nucleuses. Only we will describe the important one. So in the preoptic nucleus, there is one very important nucleus, that is preoptic nucleus. Okay, I will just mention it, PO, preoptic nucleus. In the supraoptic nucleus, we have already discussed there are 4 nucleuses, major important nuclei. So what are that 4 major important nuclei? One is suprachiasmatic nuclei, then we have the anterior hypothalamic nuclei or nucleus, then we have supraoptic nuclei and paraventricular nucleus. Okay, we will discuss the function of all these nucleus. Okay, while we discuss the functions, in between we will encounter this terms, paraventricular nucleus, supraoptic nucleus, suprachiasmatic nucleus and all. So it will be worth to know the location where exactly they are situated. Okay, similarly in the tuberal region, there arc-like nucleus, that is arcuate nucleus. Okay, arcuate nucleus, very important nucleus. Then we have the ventromedian nucleus and dorsomedian nucleus in the tuberal region. Then in the mammillary region, there are 2 important nucleus. One is posterior hypothalamic nucleus, another one is mammillary nucleus. Okay, posterior hypothalamic nucleus and mammillary nucleus. Okay, I am just writing the short form. Already we have described in detail in our lecture of anatomy in the previous video. Okay, so if you can see, there is 1 nucleus in the preoptic region, there are 4 nuclei in the supraoptic region, 3 in the tuberal region and 2 in the mammillary region. Okay, now come to our main topic, the functions of the hypothalamus. So one by one we will discuss. First and the foremost function is, it is very much helpful for maintaining the autonomic functions of our body, that is maintaining the autonomic functions through the autonomic nervous system. It is sympathetic and parasympathetic. So according to one scientist, Sherrington, okay, so according to Sherrington, this hypothalamus is considered as the head ganglion of the autonomic nervous system. Head ganglion of the autonomic nervous system. Why it is considered as the head ganglion of the autonomic nervous system? Let us see now. Let us discuss that things. Okay, so you know there are 2 important nuclei here in the medial part of the hypothalamus. One is anterior hypothalamic nucleus. Okay, I am highlighting this with the blue color now in the supraoptic region. Can you see this anterior hypothalamic region? One more is posterior hypothalamic region. Again I am highlighting with the blue color right now in the mammillary region, in the posterior side, posterior hypothalamic nucleus. Okay, now these 2 nucleuses are very important for the autonomic nervous system functioning. How means, this anterior part or the anterior hypothalamus or anterior hypothalamic nuclei, they are concerned with the parasympathetic system stimulation. That is, whenever we stimulate the anterior hypothalamic nuclei, parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system is activated. How? We will discuss now. Parasympathetic area, it is also called as parasympathetic area. Okay, similarly, if we see the posterior hypothalamus or the posterior hypothalamic nucleus, if we electrically stimulate it, posterior hypothalamus, if we electrically stimulate it, then ultimately we will be stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. So this is called a sympathetic area. Okay, and has an excitatory effect on it. Okay, so let us see in a line diagram to have a better concept. So I am just drawing a brain stem here. Brainstem is mainly consist of midbrain, pons and medulla, which will continuous as the spinal cord, okay, which will continuous as the spinal cord. So I'll just write here this brainstem, this is midbrain, this is pons, this is medulla, okay. However, there will be cerebellum on the posterior side. So now this one hypothalamus will be present here. So in this hypothalamus there are two nuclei, okay. With the blue color right now I am marking anterior hypothalamus, okay. There are so many nuclei, but the important one is anterior hypothalamic nucleus or nuclei, okay. Remember this one anterior will control the parasympathetic, okay. Similarly, there is one more nuclei which I am highlighting with the green color, that is the posterior hypothalamic nucleus. Posterior, it is present in the mammillary area, posterior hypothalamic region or the posterior hypothalamic nucleus or nuclei in plural. Nuclei means or nucleus means collection of neuronal cell bodies inside the central nervous system. Outside the central nervous system, that is in the peripheral nervous system, it is called as ganglion, okay. So now let us see how this anterior hypothalamic nucleus will serve the parasympathetic function. So the neuronal cell bodies are present here, the axons of that they form a bundle which will descend on, okay, like longitudinal fasciculus, it will bundle this bundle of axons will descend down. While descending in the midbrain, it will give connection to few of the cranial nerve nuclei, okay. I will just highlight the which cranial nerve in the midbrain. Edinger-Westphal nucleus, that is the third cranial nerve nuclei, okay. Similarly, in the pons, superior salivatory nucleus, that is concerned with the seventh cranial nerve. Then in the medulla again there will be inferior salivatory nucleus concerned with the ninth cranial nerve, then the vagus nerve nucleus, 10th cranial nerve, okay. So this 3, 7, 9th and 10th cranial nerve nuclei, and also when it descends to the spinal cord, okay, spinal cord. So sacral segment of this spinal cord from S2 to S4, sacral segment of the spinal cord is to S4. Now this is the parasympathetic nervous system. So anterior hypothalamus, which I have highlighted with the blue color, this will stimulate the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, okay. It is also called as craniosacral because it will supply the cranial nerves, mainly 3, 7th, 9th and 10th, and also the sacral part, that is S2 to S4. Similarly, this posterior hypothalamic nuclei, again it will give connections, it will go to the brainstem and again it will go back and it will give connection to the spinal cord area, mainly thoracolumbar regions, thoracolumbar region, that is from T1 to L2, okay. This parasympathetic division also gives connection to the reticular activating system here in the brainstem, reticular activating system, that is RAS, reticular activating system, okay. So this is how the hypothalamus through its anterior and posterior hypothalamic nucleus, it will control the autonomic activity of our body. So whenever if we electrically stimulate this anterior hypothalamus, it will as if we are stimulating the parasympathetic division. Similarly posterior, how to remember here, P stands for posterior, but P stands for sympathetic here. Remember, P stands for sympathetic here, PS opposite, okay. Anterior hypothalamus concerned with the parasympathetic division. Now what functions it will control? For example, in the cardiovascular system regulation, if we see, whenever this hypothalamus will regulate the heart rate, blood pressure, okay, and the cutaneous vasodilatation or vasoconstriction. Whenever there is a stimulation of the posterior hypothalamus, which will be controlling the sympathetic activity, okay. Posterior hypothalamus means sympathetic activity. So posterior hypothalamus is stimulated, then heart rate will increase, BP will also increase, okay, and it will lead to the cutaneous vasoconstriction, okay, cutaneous vasoconstriction, okay, sympathetic activity. Similarly, whenever anterior part of the hypothalamus is stimulated, and anterior hypothalamus is stimulated. So it will stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, anterior part. So it will decreases the heart rate, decreases the blood pressure, and we can see cutaneous vasodilation. Okay, cutaneous vasodilation. That's why it is called as head ganglion of the autonomic nervous system. So it will control the autonomic activity of the heart. Not only heart, other system also. For example, regulation of the pupil size, regulation of the pupil size in the eyes. So whenever the posterior and the lateral part of the hypothalamus is stimulated, so what will happen? It will causes the dilatation of the pupil. Okay, dilatation of the pupil. Typically the drugs are known as mydriatics, okay, which will dilate the sympathetic system. Similarly, anterior hypothalamus, if it is stimulated, it will causes the constriction of the pupil, that is due to the activation of parasympathetic system. Not only that, it will also control the GI tract, okay, GI tract, peristaltic and secretomotor functions. How? Again, posterior hypothalamus, that is the sympathetic activity, posterior and lateral hypothalamus will control the, or whenever they are stimulated, it will causes the diminish or decrease in the secretion, okay, various secretion from the GI tract, and decreases the motility of the GI tract. Okay. Similarly, when the anterior part of the hypothalamus is stimulated, anterior part of the hypothalamus is secreted, which is causes the parasympathetic stimulation. It will causes increase in the peristalsis, that is motility, as well as increase in the secretion or the secretomotor functions of the alimentary tract. So in this way, it will control the various systems by controlling the autonomic nervous system. So hypothalamus is very important organ structure. Just a mass of a gray matter of 4 gram, it will control such a diverse functions. Okay, this is one of the very important functions. Okay. Now secondly, it helps in regulation of the food intake. Second important function, it helps in regulation of food intake. Regulation of food intake. How it will subserve this function of regulation of food intake? So it is essential vegetative function of the hypothalamus, which maintains the body weight of an individual relatively constant over a long period. So basically it will help with the help of two centers. Feeding center, if you remember at the starting of the class, we have described this feeding center. Okay, the feeding center is present in the lateral hypothalamus. Okay, so let me show you once again this nucleus, and the satiety center is the ventromedian nucleus of the hypothalamus. Let me show you once again the diagram of that. You can see the lateral part is the feeding center. Okay, and again I am highlighting with the blue color ventromedian nucleus here in the tuberal region. Okay, tuberal region here with the blue line. So this is the satiety center. That's why I have stressed much to describe the various nuclei. Okay, so with the help of these two nuclei, it will control the food intake, that is regulation of the food intake. How? So whenever the lateral hypothalamus is stimulated, okay, that is this feeding center is stimulated, a person or an experimental animal, it will in the person or an experimental, it will create a sensation of hunger. What it will create? It, whenever it is stimulated, it will create a sensation of hunger. Okay, and leads to increased food intake. It is known as hyperphagia. This is which will cause us the obesity. So if you destroy this center, okay, if you destroy this center, feeding center is destroyed, then the sensation of hunger is lost and the person will not eat anything. That clinical condition, it is known as anorexia. Okay, whenever the feeding center is destroyed, and when it is stimulated, it will lead to sensation of hunger. Similarly, if you stimulate the satiety center, okay, it is opposite to hunger, that is feeling of fulfillment after the food intake. So that is the ventromedian nucleus. Okay, this feeding center is the lateral hypothalamic nucleus. Okay, lateral hypothalamic nucleus or nuclei, whereas satiety center is the ventromedial nucleus. So where this ventromedial nucleus is present? It is present in the tuberal region. Okay, so this ventromedian nucleus, whenever it is stimulated, it acts as a satiety center. So stimulation of this will causes the sensation of food intake, it is fulfillment. So that is, the person will be satisfied. So if suppose this center is again damaged, okay, due to some cause, then what will happen is this person will not feel satiety, okay, and they will continuously, they will go on eating. That will lead to obesity, okay, if there is center is damaged. So actually, so there is a balance activity of these two centers which will maintain the food intake. So actually, feeding center will be continuously firing, and satiety center has an inhibitory control over it, satiety center. So it will help in maintaining the food intake. Now third function of the hypothalamus here is it will help in regulation of sexual behavior and reproduction, controlling or regulation of sexual behavior and reproduction. So how it will serve this function of sexual behavior and reproduction? So it will, with the help of very important this one nuclei, we have already discussed this preoptic nuclei, okay, in the anterior portion of the hypothalamus. If you remember, both in the lateral and the medial side there is one nuclei, that is preoptic nuclei. Okay, I am highlighting this with the blue color, preoptic nuclei. Here also you can see this one. So this will control most of this function. So even this arcuate nucleus in the tuberal region, so how they will control is there is a pathway of sex regulation which is identified as from amygdala, that is from limbic system, amygdala, via stria terminalis, then preoptic area, it is this preoptic nucleus, then to the tuberal region of hypothalamus, where we have the arcuate nucleus. Okay, so this tuberal region of hypothalamus maintain the basal secretion of very important hormone GnRH, gonadotrophin releasing hormone. Okay, with its connection with the preoptic area is essential for the cyclical surge of gonadotrophin before the ovulation. Okay, let me describe you with this diagram here itself. So in this hypothalamus you can see this arcuate nucleus will secrete, the green color will secrete GnRH. Okay, what it will secrete? GnRH. Okay, and it is carried to the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, gonadotrophin releasing hormone. So with the green color I am showing you, and from this anterior pituitary gland two important hormones are released, that is FSH and LH. So this FSH and LH is under the control of this GnRH, and GnRH is produced by this tuberal region arcuate nucleus. Okay, and this FSH and LH ultimately will act on the ovaries, okay, to maintain the ovulation and also the release of estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so ultimately any problem or of the release of GnRH from hypothalamus will affect the ovarian cycle. Okay, that's why it will be helpful in this one. Destruction of this neural links between the preoptic and tuberal region prevents the ovulation. So this is how it will help in maintaining the sexual behavior and reproduction. Also in the preoptic nucleus, there is one more nuclei known as sexually dimorphic nucleus. Okay, dimorphic sexual nucleus. Okay, which also helpful in maintaining the sexual behavior of an individual. Okay, so we have discussed the three functions of the hypothalamus. Let us go to the next very important function. One of the most important function of the hypothalamus is endocrine function. Okay, regulation of the hormones, control. So basically it will control the anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland, and the posterior pituitary gland. Okay, so how it will control this? Let us first discuss the anterior pituitary gland. You know the hormones of the anterior pituitary gland, like growth hormone, okay, thyroid stimulating hormone, and follicular stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, okay, and also ACTH, adrenocorticotrophic hormones. So these are the hormones which are released from the anterior pituitary gland. So these hormones are under the control of few of the releasing and inhibiting factors which are released from the hypothalamus. Okay. So for example, growth hormone releasing factor or growth hormone inhibiting factor. So this will act on the, either it will stimulate or inhibit this growth hormone release. Similarly, thyrotrophin releasing hormone, it is thyroid, it will control the, stimulate the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay. Then we have already discussed gonadotrophin releasing hormone. So again it will stimulate the release of FSH, LH. Prolactin, very important, there is stimulating an inhibitory hormone. One inhibitory hormone, it is known as dopamine. So basically it is prolactin inhibitory hormone, okay, or inhibitory factor. So again ACTH, corticotrophic releasing hormone, CRF, that will control the adrenocorticotrophic hormone, that will ultimately control the secretion from the adrenal cortex or medulla, that is adrenal gland. So this is how. So from where these hypothalamic hormones are released, all these controlling hormones, they are released from the arcuate nucleus. So where this arcuate nucleus is present? Here you can see this arcuate nucleus, it is present here in the which region? Tuberal region. Okay. So let me highlight it with some other color here. With purple color I am highlighting this arcuate nucleus. Okay. So this arcuate nucleus, you can see with this green color, it is going through this pathway hypothalamo. Here there will be portal circulation. This is known as hypophyseal portal vessels through the tuberoinfundibular tract. Okay. So releasing and inhibiting hormone which reach the anterior pituitary by a neurovascular link through the tuberoinfundibular tract and hypophyseal portal vessels. Okay. So through this it will go and it will release so many hormones, releasing and inhibiting hormones, and it will control the anterior pituitary gland functions. Okay. Now how it will control the posterior pituitary gland function? So you know that posterior pituitary, two important hormones are released from the posterior pituitary. They are ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. Okay. This ADH, it is also known as vasopressin. Okay. So this release of this ADH and oxytocin is again controlled by the hypothalamus. How? Actually it is synthesized in the hypothalamus in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. Again I will highlight with the blue color, this in the supraoptic region you can see this supraoptic nuclei. Okay. So this supraoptic nuclei will secrete, supraoptic nuclei will actually synthesize and secrete the ADH. Okay. And it will go to the hypophyseal tract, and ultimately this ADH is released through the posterior pituitary, and a small amount of oxytocin too. So actually they are synthesized in the supraoptic nucleus, but they are released from the posterior pituitary. Similarly, the paraventricular nuclei will causes the release of oxytocin through the posterior pituitary gland. Okay. The synthesis takes place in the oxytocin synthesis takes place in the paraventricular nuclei, but it is released from the posterior pituitary gland. Okay. So this is how it will subserve the function of controlling the anterior and posterior pituitary gland. So ADH, it is released by the supraoptic nucleus, and as well as oxytocin, few amount of oxytocin released from the supraoptic nucleus, and paraventricular nucleus. Why it is called as paraventricular? Because it is near to the third ventricle. Paraventricular nucleus causes the release of oxytocin. Okay. So this way it will control the endocrine function. So let us revise what we have discussed till now. We have discussed the autonomic functions, we have discussed the regulation of food intake, then the sexual behavior and reproduction, and the endocrine function, fourth important function. Then the fifth very important function is it will help in regulation or control of the sleep-wake cycle. Okay, sleep-wake cycle. So the anterior hypothalamic nucleus or the anterior hypothalamus, anterior part of the hypothalamus is considered as the sleep facilitatory area. It is considered as the sleep facilitatory center or area, as its stimulation leads to sleep. Similarly, posterior part of the hypothalamus or the posterior hypothalamic nuclei, it is opposite to that, it is acts as a waking center. Waking center, as in stimulation will cause the wakefulness. Okay. So, sleep is also considered to occur as a negative phenomenon, it is inhibition of the wakefulness. So, whenever there is a damage of the posterior hypothalamus, okay, so lesions in the posterior hypothalamus will produce the severe coma. Okay, so in this way it will help in maintaining the sleep wake cycle. Okay, now also it will control the circadian rhythm. Control the circadian rhythm. So, circadian rhythms to the rhythm refers to the rhythmic fluctuations in certain physiological parameters of our body. So, these are called a circadian rhythm because they often show 24-hour cycle. Example of circadian rhythm is sleep wake cycle itself, rhythmic secretion of ACTH, growth hormone and all. Okay. So, mainly it is controlled by very important hormone, not hormone here, center, suprachiasmatic center. Okay, suprachiasmatic nuclei or center of the hypothalamus. Where this is present? Again in the supraoptic region. If you remember this, again I am showing that chart. This diagram is very important to understand the functions. Okay, so with the blue color again I am highlighting here suprachiasmatic nuclei here. So this nuclei will control this circadian rhythm. It is also called as biological clock. So it will control the biological clock. Okay, so how it will subserve this function is, so there are many theories how it will control this is. One of this is suprachiasmatic nuclei receive the inputs from the eyes via retinohypothalamic fibers, and also the lateral geniculate body. So, by its close association to the optic chiasma and the lateral geniculate bodies, okay, which is present in the thalamus, lateral geniculate body, part of the thalamus, considered as also metathalamus. So, it will control the circadian rhythm. Okay. So, what is the significance of circadian rhythm? So, it will enable the homeostatic mechanisms to be utilized immediately and automatically. For example, there is a rhythm in the urinary excretion of even ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Okay, so we won't go much detail because the video is becoming more lengthier. To be precise, it will be help in maintaining the circadian rhythm with the help of this nuclei, that is suprachiasmatic nuclei. Okay, now after knowing these very important functions, then let us discuss another functions of hypothalamus. So, it will help in the regulation of body temperature. So, body temperature regulation is also controlled by the hypothalamus. Okay, so basically there are two centers in the hypothalamus. One is called as heat loss center. Okay, another one is heat gain center. So, which nuclei is considered as heat loss and heat gain center? Let us discuss. So, the anterior hypothalamic nuclei in the supraoptic region. So, anterior hypothalamus, even the preoptic area. So, that area is considered as heat loss center, whereas heat gain center is the posterior hypothalamic nucleus. Posterior hypothalamus. Okay, let me show you the diagram once again as it is very important. So, here anterior hypothalamus, this one, it is called as heat loss center, and even the preoptic area, whereas posterior hypothalamus it is called as heat gain center. So, why it is called as heat loss and heat gain center, let us discuss. So, you know the normal body temperature is around 37 degrees centigrade. Okay. So, in spite of the variation in the environmental temperature, our body temperature will maintain its normal level of on average 37 degrees centigrade. How? Through this heat loss and heat gain center. So, whenever there is increase in the body temperature, then this environmental temperature, heat loss center is stimulated. Stimulation of this heat loss center will act, that is the anterior hypothalamus, it will causes some mechanisms that will causes the cooling of the body. For example, cutaneous vasodilation. cutaneous vasodilatation, that dilatation of the blood vessels in the skin, cutaneous vasodilation. Also it will causes the sweating. Okay, also it will causes the sweating. So cutaneous vasodilatation and sweating it will cause. So by this it will lose the heat, okay, and maintain the temperature in the warm climates. And opposite or conversely, posterior hypothalamus, that is the heat gain center, it will be helpful whenever there is a decrease in the body temperature, environmental temperature. So it will try to increase the heat in the body by shivering and cutaneous vasoconstriction. Okay, so in this way hypothalamus will helpful in maintaining the body temperature also. Okay, then next important function is regulation of water balance. Regulation of water balance. Regulation of water balance. So hypothalamus has a role in even maintaining the water balance. So by two mechanisms, through the thirst center. So thirst center is present in the lateral part of the hypothalamus, okay, and also through the osmoreceptors which are present in the supraoptic nucleus. Supraoptic nucleus. In the supraoptic nucleus there are osmoreceptors. Okay, osmoreceptors, and this third center is present in the lateral part of the thalamus. Okay, that is the lateral nucleus of hypothalamus. Hypothalamus. Okay, so third center in the supraoptic nucleus, with the help of this it will control the water balance. How it will control the water balance? Let us discuss. Suppose there is decrease in the total body water, okay, in the body. So what will it will lead? It will lead to increase in the plasma hypertonicity. Okay, because of the decrease body fluid or body water. So this increase in the plasma osmolarity will stimulate the third center in the lateral hypothalamus, third center, as well as the it will stimulate the osmoreceptors in supraoptic nucleus. Supraoptic nucleus in the supraoptic region. Okay, so whenever there is increased stimulation of the third center, it leads to increase in the water intake, then ultimately it will restore the normal restoration of body water, okay, by increasing the third center. One mechanism, normal restoration of the body water by third center. Second is by stimulation of the osmoreceptors. So by the stimulation of the osmoreceptors, so it will stimulate the release of the ADH by the posterior pituitary gland. And what this ADH will cause is, it will go into the blood and it will act on the kidney. So I am drawing a rough diagram of a nephron. Line diagram of a nephron is proximal convoluted tubule, again loop of Henle, then the distal part. So distal part we have the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. Okay, so generally nephron there are efferent arteriole, glomerulus, and the efferent arteriole. So from this glomerulus filtration will take place, and this filtered either reabsorbed or secreted, and ultimately the urine is formed. A drop of urine, I am just showing you, urine is formed, right. So this formation of the urine, okay, so this formation of the urine through the nephrons of our kidneys. In one kidney around 1.2 million nephrons are present, right, 1.2 million nephrons are present. So this nephrons, so wait a second, I will just draw once again that nephron. So this distal part, that is the DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. So the cells here, epithelial cells. So ADH, antidiuretic hormone, will act on the receptors of this collecting duct and distal convoluted tubule. By acting that, it will increases the reabsorption of the water or the fluid from the distal part of the nephron. So, when there is a increase in the reabsorption of the water or the fluid, reabsorption of the water or the fluid, what will happen is there is decrease urine. Diuresis means increase in the urine. Okay, so whenever there is a decreased urine, then ultimately the normal restoration of the body water is present. Okay, so it will help in maintaining the water balance. So it will help in maintaining the water balance by thirst center and osmoreceptors. Okay, then finally it is also helpful in maintaining the emotional and instinctual behavior. Role in emotional and instinctual behavior. So basically it is controlled by the limbic system or the limbic cortex. However, hypothalamus is connected with the limbic system and it will serve this function by two important centers. What are the two important centers? That is the reward center and the punishment center. Reward center and punishment center. So with the reward and punishment center, so reward center is located along the course of medial forebrain bundle, especially in the lateral and medial forebrain bundle, that is in the lateral and ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus. Lateral and ventromedial nucleus of hypothalamus. So whenever this center is stimulated, so person will causes this will encourages the animal or human being to seek more of such stimulation. Okay, that is the reward. They will feel like getting the reward. Opposite to that is the punishment center. So this punishment center, it is located in the medial hypothalamus, medial part of the hypothalamus, more specifically in the periventricular zone, near the third ventricle, periventricular zone. So the electrical stimulation of the center, that is this punishment center, will lead to the pain. So it will lead to the stimulation of this area, will lead to the punishment symptoms like pain, fear, defense and escape reaction. Okay, so this type of the reactions are seen after the stimulation of this, that is the punishment. So they will avoid this further stimulation to this area. Okay, so and reward, almost everything what we do is related to some way to the reward and the punishment. Okay, if we do something that is rewarding, we continue to do it. If we do something that is punishing, we will cease to do it. Okay, so therefore the reward and punishment center constitute one of the most important of all the controllers of our bodily activities, our drives, our aversions and our motivations. Okay, so this is all about the functions of the hypothalamus. So we have discussed various important functions of the hypothalamus. So let us revise what we have discussed today. So we have discussed about the physiology or the functions of the hypothalamus. So mainly we have discussed what it controls, the autonomic functions. Okay, then what we have discussed is it will control the food intake, regulation of the food intake will control the food intake by the satiety center and the feeding center. Okay, then it will control the reproductive functions also, reproductive functions and the sexual behavior. Okay, reproductive function and the sexual behavior. Then what we have discussed is about the endocrine function, especially the anterior and posterior pituitary hormones is controlled by this hypothalamus. Then we have discussed about the sleep wake cycle. So you can see the diverseness of this small 4 gram gray matter of hypothalamus, how it is helpful in maintaining these various functions. Okay, then it is also helpful in maintaining the circadian rhythm. Okay, circadian rhythm. Then finally we have seen it helps in maintaining the body temperature. then the water balance, okay, and also the emotional and intellectual behavior. Okay, so many functions. Okay, these are the very important functions of the hypothalamus. So hope you like our explanation here. If you like, so please subscribe our channel and share